You're watching PIX on Politics Daily with Dan Mannarino.
Hey everybody, welcome to PIX on Politics. I'm Dan Mannarino. It is March 10th. Hopefully everybody is enjoying the weather, right? We got I call it the full spring, right? Fake spring, because you get 2 days of 70 degrees, then we go back down to like winter temperatures. But hey, enjoy it while it lasts, okay? And there's been a lot going on in the political world. So just happening today, just in case you're wondering, over in New Jersey, Governor Mike Sherrill presenting her first big budget address. She's trying to close a $3 billion budget deficit, but she also wants to really tackle things she campaigned on. I mean, she campaigned on utility costs and freezing utility costs for folks to bring down the cost there, property taxes, but she's making a big push now in the education world. So especially within the mental health component of education. So that is all happening today. And our Jim Vassell, our New Jersey Trenton reporter, is covering that. So stay tuned for more on that. And we'll be talking to Jim right here tomorrow about some of the things that are unveiled in this big budget announcement. So that's what's going on in New Jersey. And then in New York, there's a whole host of things that are going on. Of course, topping the headlines that so many of you are interested on what exactly unfolded at Gracie Mansion last weekend, right? With the two protests that were happening at the same time, with those IEDs, the improvised explosive devices that were tossed. And so there's a lot that has been unfolded now in that investigation and what's been playing out. And it all is falling under this political umbrella. Let me bring in Emily right now. As you know, she is covering all things for us in the digital world. Great to have you back, Emily.
Happy to be here.
So let's first talk about this big investigation that's playing out now. Two people are under arrest. Fortunately, these things didn't go off. Yeah. But the intent from reading some of these details were that they wanted to be worse than the Boston Marathon bombing. So kind of lay out what exactly unfolded.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, the NYPD has come out and said that they've looked at these devices and this could have been a deadly and injurious situation. So kind of what happened here is that there was a protest planned outside Gracie Mansion called Stop the Islamic Takeover of New York City. It was organized by Jake Lang, who is an internet personality. After this protest, Mayor Mamdani called him a white supremacist. Yeah. He's known for some pretty extreme views. And then there was a huge group of protesters that came out to Gracie Mansion to kind of push back on this message from Jake Lang. Around 12:15, prosecutors say that the two young men, 18 and 19 years old, who have now been arrested, showed up. The first one of them, Amir Balat, is accused of throwing a homemade explosive device towards the protesters. He then runs down the block, gets a second one from the second young man who's been arrested, which is Ismail Qayyumi. Mm-hmm. Gets a second device, kind of tosses it in the direction of the NYPD, who are chasing after him at this point. There's very clear photographs from both prosecutors and the media of this whole thing. You see the handoff between them. You see each of the tosses. You see it in front of the NYPD, and then you see the NYPD chasing Amir Balat as he, runs away. Both were arrested on the scene, and now they're facing federal charges related to terrorism, because kind of in the immediate aftermath, as they were taken to the precinct, both of them separately said that they had been inspired by ISIS. And the cops asked them, prompted them, said, hey, have you heard of the Boston bombing? And that's when they said at the precinct, we wanted to go even bigger.
The mayor came out yesterday on Monday for the first time to make comments about this. Many had been wondering why he didn't make comments sooner. Yeah. And so what did he have to say at his announcement yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday.
Was he home?
He was not home. Him and Rama were not home at the time. He came out and he said, he kind of said, what Jake Lang stands for is vile, and I'm not in support of it. But as he said before, I'm very strong supporter of First Amendment rights. Mm-hmm. And while I hate what he says, he has his right to say it. He came out and said that very clearly. Yeah. I don't agree with this, but he has every right to, speak his mind. Yeah. And, that these two young men who have been arrested should be held completely accountable to the law.
Yeah, I mean, and the governor of New York came out and now has said that New York is on a heightened alert. Given what's happening in Iran right now, at the same time, New York was already on a heightened alert. Mm-hmm. But now she's talking about National Guard and houses of worship that are being protected with more police presence.
Yeah, she has said that the state police are increasing their presence at sensitive locations across the state. And the National Guard, we still have just over 1,000 National Guard members deployed in the New York City transit system, and she said they're going to stay exactly where they are. I forget exactly what she called it, but she said we're in some heightened threat risk for some period of time.
Yeah, and we were already in one technically before this because of the war situation in Iran.
Right.
And so they had already started beefing up some areas of worship and houses of worship already. Okay, so that is the latest there in terms of what exactly unfolded outside
and
Gracie
just for
Mansion.
what it's worth, because we have all this stuff going on, the NYPD commissioner, Jessica Tisch, did say that they know that these two young men who are accused had come out to counter-protest Jake Lang. So they're not speculating that they maybe had some other motivation to come and throw the homemade bombs.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of speculation of whether or not Zohran Mamdani himself was the target here because he's the first Muslim mayor.
Right.
And so there were a lot of things that kind of were being said on social media. And so I feel like when the NYPD came out and kind of set the record straight of what this exactly was.
They said, we know why they came here. We know how they were motivated.
Right. All right. So that's the situation there in Gracie Mansion. I know we're going to continue to follow it. The criminal complaint, these two now facing a court date that they have that's yet to be decided yet, right?
I believe so.
Let me talk about the other big news in New York, and that's the budget. And there's a lot of talk about the budget and whether or not the city's going to be able to close this deficit, what exactly the deficit is or was, whether or not Zohran Mamdani will be able to tax the rich to get some of his things paid for. But the city council is also having hearings because remember, the city council is monumental in the city budget. They have to have this handshake agreement and coming to terms with the budget. It is usually a moment of contention between the city council and the mayor during these negotiations. So this is their first week of hearings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The city council now will break down the budget into its component parts. So they'll look at public safety, FDNY funding, they'll look at schools, they'll break it down piece by piece, and they'll start going through it with a fine-tooth comb saying, we don't see funding for XYZ, or we think we need more funding in this place or this place. And it's not just about, lump sums of money. There's also some kind of pressing the agencies on how they're using their money. So last year, the NYPD was pushed on overtime practices. They were pushed on certain tactics that they use. They're asked to justify in kind of a broad sense why they are owed and how they're using the money they're given. And each of these hearings will go on 6 or 7 hours. They're huge hearings.
There are two things I want to talk about. One being something that happened on PIX 11 when the mayor came out and he signed this executive order with these I forget what he called them, savings officers to kind of come up with the ideas of where they can trim the fat in some of their agencies. That is due this Friday.
That is due this Friday. And I think the big asterisk here is that the budget is balanced on these savings. So the budget is predicated on these officers finding, at least their target. So Friday will be a big day to see if these agencies, the administration is saying that it's not a mandate. They're not going to be forced to necessarily find the savings. But if the budget is balanced on it, they're going to have to find the savings.
Yeah, I mean, so to be continued on that front. And then something that I thought was really interesting with some of your original reporting, Emily, which was campaign promises that were made along the way that kind of fit into the budget world that are missing from the budget.
Absolutely. So, Mamdani's campaign was famously kind of an expensive campaign. People said a lot of your promises, how are you going to pull them off? Taxes is still what he's saying, is how he'll pull off some of these things. But I looked through all of his campaign promises and tried to create a list of what is in it and what isn't. People have noticed by now there was a promise to give 0.5% of the budget to libraries. That has not been delivered. Libraries have about 0.39% of the budget, which is about 140 million short of the promise. There's no funding in the budget for the Department of Community Safety, which is a pretty major promise from the campaign. The administration says that will come in the executive budget later in the year. It's a huge sum of money they're going to have to find. There's littler as in less expensive promises that are also missing. An Office of LGBTQIA plus Affairs has not really been mentioned, how they're going to find the money for that. But on the flip, there are a lot of promises that were made that are included. That's funding for bus lane improvements to make the buses faster, funding for bike lane improvements, funding for early childhood education, huge amount of added funding, tenant protection, things like
Well,
that.
especially with the whole 2K rollout.
Absolutely. Like there's a huge amount of not just money, but hiring baked into the budget.
So have you reached out to them or?
Yeah.
And did they talk about this or no?
No, they did not respond to requests for comment. Neither did the Office of Management and Budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. We'll see how that all plays out in terms of the budget, because I think there's going to be things the City Council is specifically looking for when it comes to NYPD, when it comes to NYPD numbers and staffing and budget, that they are going to want included in the budget. Am I getting in trouble for banging on the table? I'm sorry. And so we'll see, because it's due in June.
Right.
And you got the handshake's supposed to be in June.
Right.
And then while this is all happening at the same time, you have Governor Hochul with her budget. Who is she saying? I'm not raising taxes. She's pretty steadfast on the fact that she's not raising taxes.
Right.
Although, I don't know if you were looking at
Yeah.
the state legislature saying we're kind of interested in raising taxes.
Yeah, they've now kind of put it on the table as a proposition. No matter how much support there is for it, Kathy Hochul will have to sign off on it and agree. So it's definitely a small step forward for that promise. But, she has not changed her tune.
Yeah, I mean, the mayor himself, Mr. Mamdani, has said pretty all along, I can talk. I used to be a member of the state legislature, so I know how to talk to these folks to get them on board. So if you have the state legislature on board, and the governor's still a no in an election year, it's gonna be very interesting how all this plays out.
Very interesting.
Emily, always good to see you. Always good stuff. And we'll see you next week here, okay? All right, everybody. So that'll do it for this edition of Picks on Politics. There's a lot going on. Continue to sound off on what you want us to cover and talk about, and we will bring it to you. But in the meantime, I'm Dan Mannarino. Have a great day.